All right, let's get right into it. If you've ever been in the trenches of production planning, you know that feeling, the constant pressure to meet deadlines. But what do you do when the system itself gives you a schedule that's just impossible? Today we're going to unpack a really slick SAP function that solves this exact problem.
So here's the nightmare scenario, right? It's the kind of thing that keeps planners up at night. You get a customer order, the system does its magic, and then it spits out a start date that was 2 days ago. It's a total paradox, and it can bring everything to a grinding halt. So how does a smart system like SAP get around this?
Okay, so before we can really appreciate the fix, we've got to understand what's broken in the first place. The problem actually starts with the default scheduling method, something called backwards scheduling. Let's take a look at why this standard approach can sometimes, well, completely break down.
When you boil it down, SAP has two completely opposite ways of looking at a plan. You've got backward scheduling, which is all about the customer. It starts with their due date and works its way back to see when you have to start. Then you have forward scheduling, which is all about reality. It starts right now, today, and works forward to figure out when you can actually have the product ready.
And you can see the whole problem laid out right here. With backward scheduling, if that customer due date is just too soon and your lead times are what they are, the calculation just keeps going backward, right past today's date, and bam, you land on an impossible start date. You literally can't start production yesterday.
So what happens when the system hits this logical wall? Does it just throw up an error message and give up? Nope. It does something way smarter. It automatically, and kind of beautifully, flips its own logic. This is where forward scheduling steps in as the built-in, elegant solution.
You know, it's almost as if the system just takes a second and uses some good old-fashioned common sense. It calculates that past date and basically says, whoa, hold on a minute. That makes no sense. Let's just start now and figure out the realistic finish date from here. It's just a pragmatic, logical move.
So how does this whole automatic fix actually work under the hood? Well, believe it or not, it's not some crazy complicated algorithm. It's actually a beautifully simple 3-step calculation that gets us from that impossible past to a totally realistic future. Let's break it down.
Here's the whole thing in a nutshell. First, the system plants its feet firmly in reality. The start date is today, period. Then it adds on all the time you need to actually make the product. And finally, it tacks on the time you need to process everything after it's made. See? Simple.
All right, let's dig into that first step. The order start date is the absolute foundation for the rest of the schedule. Instead of some made-up date in the past, forward scheduling makes a clean, logical decision. Production starts now. Today's system date becomes the new, non-negotiable starting line. Okay, next up, the system adds the in-house production time. Now, this isn't just some random number. It's the grand total of all your manufacturing steps. For a company making food, this could be everything from mixing and fermentation to filling the containers and final packaging. This gives you what's called the order finish date.
And finally, and this is the part people often forget about, the system adds the goods receipt processing time. Just because something's rolled off the assembly line doesn't mean it's ready to go. You've still got quality checks, final labeling, moving stuff into the warehouse, all that good stuff. This last step gives us the true availability date.
Theory is one thing, but let's make this totally real. We're going to walk through a simple, everyday example from the consumer packaged goods world to see exactly how these 3 steps work in practice. Let's pretend we're making a batch of yogurt cups.
So here's our setup. Let's say today's date in the system is September 11th. We know that making our yogurt cups, from the fermentation all the way through to packaging, takes a total of 5 days. And after they're packed, we need another 2 days for quality control and getting them ready to ship. All right, step 1. Bam! The system hits the reset button. Forget the past. The order start date is today, September 11th. Next, we tack on our 5 days of production time. That moves us forward to September 16th. That's the day the very last yogurt cup comes off the packaging line. And for the final piece of the puzzle, we add those 2 days for processing. That brings us to our final date, September 18th. This is the first day that yogurt is actually ready and available to ship to a customer. So there it is, all laid out nice and neat. We started on the 11th, and we ended up with a final availability date on the 18th. What we have now is a clear, logical, and, most importantly, a realistic plan. You've seen the logic, you've seen the real-world example, but how do you make sure this stuff actually sticks in your brain? Let's quickly run through a little cheat sheet with the key things to remember.
To make this super easy to remember, just think of these 3 little cues. First, today is start, that's the golden rule. SAP will not start in the past. Second, the little mantra, add, done. That helps you remember the simple three-part formula. And last, forward equals future. You're always pushing forward into the future to find a real date.
Or, hey, if you're a formula person, here it is in one clean line. When the system has to make this switch, the final availability date is just today, plus your production time, plus your goods receipt time. That's the whole thing right there.
And at the end of the day, that's the real magic here. Think of forward scheduling as the system's safety net. It's what automatically bridges the gap between what a customer wants and what's actually possible starting right this second.
So, I'll leave you with this question to chew on. Now that you really get this automatic switch from backward to forward scheduling, how can you use that knowledge? Could it help you give your sales team more realistic timelines, or maybe help you